Well, in this video I'm going to show you two different examples of how to change from an expression using exponents like this one, 4 with an exponent equal to 1/2, to an expression using roots, also known as radicals, in this case the square root of 4. The first thing that you have to know about changing from exponents to roots, also known as radicals, is that radicals are nothing more than exponents that are not integers. For example, in this case, the exponent is 1/2, 1 over 2, and the base number is the 4. What you first have to do is write the radical sign, which is this one right here. After you write the radical sign, the 4 is going to become the radicand. The base number becomes the radicand, and the radicand is simply anything that goes inside of the radical sign. Now look at the fraction that is the exponent. The numerator, which equals 1, becomes the exponent of the radicand. Only the numerator is going to be the exponent of the radicand. The denominator, which in this case is 2, becomes the grade of the root. The grade of the root is this number that goes outside of the radical sign that kind of looks like an exponent, but it's not an exponent. It is called the grade of the root. Now, you remember if you have 4 with an exponent 1, that simply equals 4. So I don't have to write the exponent 1. 4 with an exponent 1, simply 4. And when you have a radical sign or a root, and the root is of grade 2, that is called the square root. That is the most common root that we use, the one that you're used to seeing in your calculator, and we usually never write the 2. If you don't see any grade outside of the radical sign, if you don't see any number here, it usually will mean that that is the square root. So it is exactly the same thing if I put a number 2 here, or if I put nothing. Most people, most computer, most calculator will simply understand that you're asking for the square root of 2, which is a root of grade 2. Now, as I said before, these two expressions are the same. You can write the grade 2 if you want, or you can just ignore it. But what does the square root mean? What does it mean to have the square root of 2? Well, the square root of any number is simply the number that I have to multiply by itself to get the radicand, whatever is inside of the radical sign. For example, in this case, the radicand is 4. What number do I have to multiply by itself in order to get the number 4? And in this case, it is the number 2. 2 multiplied by itself, or 2 times 2, equals 4. So the square root of 4 is 2. Now let's do another example here. Now, the base number now is the number 8, and the exponent is 1/3, 1 over 3. So we do the same thing. First, we draw the radical sign, and the base number becomes the radicand. It goes inside of the radical sign. The numerator is going to become the exponent of the radicand. So only the 1 becomes the exponent of the 8, which is inside of the radical sign. And the denominator of that fraction, the fraction that is the exponent, is going to become the grade of the root. So you see now that the root, the radical sign, has a grade of 3. Now, a root of grade 3 is called the cube root, and it is different from the square root. So in this case, it is very necessary to write the number 3 to differentiate from the square root and from the cube root. So what does the cube root mean? First of all, remember that we had an exponent 1 here, but it was not necessary because 8 with an exponent 1 simply equals 8, so I do not have to write it. It is exactly the same thing that happened in the previous example with the number 4. But now, What is the cube root of 8? Again, the cube root of any number simply means what number do I have to multiply by itself a total of 3 times in order to get the radicand, the number inside of the radical sign. So, what number do I have to multiply by itself a total of 3 times that equals 8? And the answer is again the number 2. But I'm multiplying the 2 by itself a total of 3 times. Remember, 2 times 2 equals 4, but I have to multiply it again for a total of 3 times 2 times 2 times 2 to get the number 8. Times 2 is 4, times 2 again, 8. So the cube root of 8 equals also 2. So remember, if you want to change from an exponent that is not an integer, the first thing you have to do in order to use this method is to express it as a fraction. So we have it here, and what you do is that the base number becomes the radicand, goes inside of the radical sign. The numerator becomes the exponent of the radicand, the exponent of the number that is inside the number or the variable that's inside of the square root sign or the radical sign, sorry. So the numerator, number on top of the fraction, is the exponent of the radicand, and the denominator becomes the grade of the root. As we did before, 8 goes inside of the radical sign, 1 becomes the exponent, which I can ignore because 8 with an exponent 1 simply equals 8, and 3 becomes the grade of the root, and remember, a root of grade 3 is called the cube root.